know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punklottopod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
And I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we assign our guests a year and they choose one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year for us to talk about. You know, it's funny, like the way we do the episodes with a guest, we just roll right into today, what are we talking about? But that feels kind of weird whenever it's just the two of us. So, what are we There's no guest, so what are we talking?
It's in the title. You know what we're talking about. We're talking about 1992?
Fuck, no, it's like, we're going to get into it. Okay. 91, I think, is the year it actually is supposed to be, according to...
That's the chart we're looking at, right?
Yeah, that's the chart we're looking at, so we'll get into it.
Well, we're talking about Reverend Horton Heat and his record, Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em.
Yeah.
Is it he? I mean, he's Jim.
He is also the Reverend Horton Heat.
He is the Reverend as well. We'll get into that as well. I got to stop my cat from banging on the microphone stand because I don't think the shock mount's working.
I don't hear it.
I heard it.
Yeah. So, no guests today. You know, we had some scheduling issues, due to me going to school, Dylan working during a pandemic in the service industry.
Yeah, working weird hours and... Yeah.
So we just pulling a solo. If you head over to our Patreon, we just did an I'm Listening, which is, where we talk about all the stuff we listened to over the last month.
Yeah. Sometime in the last period of time between the last time we did one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't do one for a minute because we were doing the year-end recap stuff, so... A lot of re-listening to stuff we were about to talk about on our best ofs. So head over to there. That's patreon.com/punklottopod. And also, what you can do is, if you become a patron, all it takes is $1. You get access to all of our bonus audio. And you also get access to playlists that Dylan puts together and polls that we do. So we're currently doing a poll based on our Valentine's celebration. As you know, we've done My Bloody Valentine's Day for the last couple years, and it's a shoegaze-centric episode we do once a year. And if you want to vote on which albums we are talking about over there, you can head onto the Patreon and become a member. Should we say what the choice? Yeah, let's say what the choices are. So, we went with the Big Five. We were questioning who the Big Four were originally, and then we couldn't decide on who the fourth big band is.
I mean, yeah, I think one of our big fives might even be like one of the big seven.
Yeah. But we put them on there just to make sure they get a chance to...
we're making our case.
Be talked about. I thought they were a bigger deal than they were, surprisingly. So your choices are Isn't Anything by My Bloody Valentine. Might as well get the big one out of the way there. We also have Raise by Swerve Driver. Nowhere by Ride, Just for a Day by Slowdive, and Spooky by Lush. So, currently Lush is in the lead, so if you want one of those other records to be the one we talk about on our Valentine's Day episode, head on over to the Patreon and vote there. I'm rooting for Swerve Driver.
I like all of these records. I could really actually talk about all of them, so yeah. I'm curious to see what ultimately wins.
Yeah, exciting. So yeah, that'll be open up until... Let's see, when we probably will be recording that. My guess is within the next day or two of the episode going up, actually. So, yeah. Deadline is...
Sleep.
We'll see. Maybe the deadline is already too late for this to really be included, but we'll see. Cool. We are on all forms of social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, @punklottopod. We have an email. It's punklottopod@gmail.com. And we have a voicemail. And today, I wanted to play a couple of the voicemails we just recently got. And there's one we've been saving for a minute, and then another one we kind of mentioned. But I figure what we would do is we'll play these voicemails and respond to them. So, Dylan, I will splice them in better quality, but I'm going to play them just basically off my phone for you. So we'll just be quiet for the first one, and then I'll splice in the audio.
Hey, my name is Justin. I enjoy your podcast immensely. What I think, and I haven't listened to all your episodes, but you guys are a little remiss of, and I know it's a niche genre, but Ramones core seems oddly enough missing from your podcast. I think it gets mentioned here or there. I know there is a podcast, The Dummy Room, that's specifically a Ramones core podcast, but I'd like to hear what you guys think about it. I'd like to see like one of those like Rumble bracket showdowns that you do. That'd be kind of cool with like Ramones core bands. And specifically, I think it's very interesting that the band the Riverdales seem to be more responsible for Ramones core than the actual Ramones are. And I feel like you have more of like an eagle's eye view, and you know about a lot of records, and I feel like you'd bring a lot of perspective to that niche genre. Just a suggestion. You guys are cool, and I appreciate all the entertainment that your podcast has given me. Thanks. Have a lovely holiday.
Thank you. Justin, I think is what that name was.
It sounded like Justin.
Yeah.
I don't think it's Joshin.
No, the Google predictive text thinks it was Jocelyn, and I don't know if that was completely right either, but...
Yeah, that didn't sound right.
Thank you for the voicemail. Ramones core. Thoughts?
I like the idea of a Ramones core bracket. We haven't done a bracket in a while. Just depends on who wants to come on and be the tiebreaker, the deciding vote with us. Not sure who among our stable would be most inclined to commit to a Ramones core bracket. But I think that would be a really good way to kind of talk about that genre. Because he talked about the Riverdales, and I'm like, I don't know anything about the Riverdales. And I think that's kind of like why we don't talk about Ramones core too much. It is definitely a big tentpole genre in punk, but it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like maybe we just kind of know it exists and we know who some of the big bands are, but we haven't spent much time with it. So bracket would be a good way to do that.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, I think one of the things that I avoid talking about with the Ramones core is Ben Weasel and Screeching Weasel being such a big part of it too. And he's a very difficult person to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've managed to talk about other difficult people on this show. Mm-hmm. But
and the Queers are another really big one that is also like very difficult to talk about them too, just because of
very little of that has aged well.
Yeah, but to be fair, we're about to talk about somebody else difficult today, so
Yeah.
And we talked about X, who are difficult too. So I guess like avoiding difficult musicians and artists, I don't know. There's a weird kind of like, do I want to platform them, but like everybody knows who Screeching Weasel is anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we have our blind spots. I think that's what it boils down to.
But my big Ramones core bands were primarily, I mean, I don't know how much you would call these bands Ramones core. Well, the Huntingtons was specifically was like the biggest one. They do straight up Ramones cover albums. They do it so much to the degree that it I don't know. It's derivative is not the right word. It's 100% just trying to do the Ramones.
Yeah, it's full pastiche.
Yeah. And I'll admit, like, the Riverdales, I don't know much about. I know there's, like, connections. Isn't there, like, Yeah, it's been the Ben Weasel connection on so many bands that are in that genre that I'm like, I don't know who is cool to talk about in that scene. I do love the Groovy Ghoulies. I would say a lot of their early material probably falls under that category as well. Same goes for a lot of Mr. T Experience. But these bands also kind of just, like, expanded into more, like, bubblegum pop punk type stuff, too. Yeah, I would like to do a good Ramones core band, though. Like, what, the Methadones, or would you consider the Lillingtons?
Yeah, I would say the Lillingtons.
And Dan Vapid and the Cheats, which I think, he's in one of those other bands, too. There's Dopamines, Copyrights, all those bands. There's a lot of them to talk about. So, yeah, we'll part of it is when we have guests, it's up to them to kind of choose what record we talk about. So, and Dylan and I kind of have a way of choosing random records, but maybe we could go out of our way. Maybe we could just make a point to do our Ramones core.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Whenever we're by ourselves, we'll see if there's something that comes up. We'll maybe not overlook them.
Yeah.
That's kind of. We kind of landed on what we landed on today. We were like, should we not? There was a little bit of kind of choice in the matter. So
yeah. So we have a couple more voicemails. These are two more. They're tied together. So we'll go ahead and play these.
Hey, I heard what you guys said about Madball. Fuck you all. You fucking jabroni motherfuckers. You're gonna catch a beating if I see you on the street, if I see you at the airport, if I see you at the fucking deli. Catch a beating. Madball.
Well, that's the first voicemail. I think we kind of addressed it somewhere on the show, because then they followed up with this voicemail.
Hey, I got a message for you punk lotto jabronis. You think the street's a joke? You think the hardcore life's a joke? You think Madball's a joke, huh? Let me tell you something. I've been working out every day, and the first heads I crack on my new washboard stomach, it's gonna be you two. Okay, so fuck you fuck yous. Madball!
my new washboard stomach.
Hey, you better watch out, man.
Hey, pick a place. Let's go. What's your favorite deli?
Yeah, when I heard this message, I thought it was our good friend Steve Doesn't pranking us originally, but I don't know. Looks like we got some real beef.
We've got some trouble.
So name your spot. We'll meet you up. But yes, if you want to call and leave a voicemail and have it played on the show, you can call 202-688-PUNK and leave us a message. 3-minute limit. If you want to leave a longer message than that, call it again and leave another one. It's cool. We'll probably sit in and play it. But yeah, that's fun. I hope we get more calls like this. But well, that's all the stuff on top of the episode. So let's roll into format. Like I said, this is the show where we sign a year. And so I went through and looked at years that we hadn't repeated in a minute. And it looked like it'd been almost a year since we'd done the year 1991. And, of course, we like to take a little look at what else came out that year, just to give us some context, just to get a base.
I think there's a good reason we haven't done 91 in a while.
Because we did the best record from that year already?
Yeah, we did like the one of 3 records. No, there's a few more than that. There's actually quite a few really, really, really good records on here, but there is my favorite Fugazi record, which I talked about on the 100 and 100 Steady Diet of Nothing, just reminding me that no one has ever done Fugazi.
On our show? Yeah.
On this show. No one will touch Fugazi for some reason. They've been on the charts many times.
Mm-hmm. I think
it's
part
too
of it...
obvious.
I think that's what everybody's been avoiding. They're just like, well, I don't want to do an obvious pick. But we have one coming up. I haven't told you what it is yet. It's a very obvious pick.
Good.
Rhymes,
those are easy to do.
It rhymes with Onic Uth, and we'll tell you which one it is when we get to it. But important record. Yeah. I would like to talk about Fugazi, but yeah, I guess it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I don't know if you do like a deep dive on a single record. I think any record is interesting to talk about. So
I think people are just like, so much of Fugazi's history has been documented and talked about extensively. So
yeah,
maybe people are just like, what's left to say that no one already knows?
Yeah, you'd really only probably tie it into like your personal story. I feel like that's like the only angle to take that's not like entirely done.
Which I think that's interesting too. So
yeah,
somebody come do a Fugazi record.
Yeah, for sure. There's a monster record that came out this year, but I'm actually going to save that when we talk about our album because there's a connection there. This is, of course, the year Slint released Spiderland, and kind of like, is this the beginning of that wave of math rock, or was anybody else kind of predating that?
This is really kind of the watershed moment, because we have a Jehu record this year as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're self-titled. which is their second record. No, I was wrong. Sorry, it is their first record. Yeah, so this is really like kind of the turning point for that becoming its own genre and not just kind of like sort of adjacent to noise rock. And, you know, if I don't know how mathy do you really consider shellac, but they're definitely an influence, and that's kind of the scene where it comes from.
Yeah, Pixies Trompe Le Monde came out that year. You know, underrated? I think it's better than its reputation, maybe. But I don't know. It might be one of the more well-regarded ones. Probably more so than Bossa Nova.
It is. I think it is a little better regarded. It's got Alec Eiffel, UMass, and Motorway to Roswell, and Bird Dream. Yeah, I think there's more. I think there are more standout tracks. I think Bossa Nova. But I mean, everything. Really, both of their records after Doolittle are just kind of like, it's not Doolittle.
Yeah. Massive record for me, No Pocky for Kitty by Superchunk. They have an album prior to this, but this is the one where they become Superchunk. That nice. Was John Worster on this record? He's not on the first record. I don't remember when he came into the band.
No, it's Chuck still on drums.
Still on this record. Oh, okay. But I think Mac and Jim have finally figured out kind of like the sound that they were going to kind of run with for the next couple records.
This is one of the few Superchunk records that actually shows up on the punk charts.
Yeah.
On old Rate Your Music. It's one of the few records that they will concede is heavily influenced by punk rock, even though literally all of them are.
Yeah. I think What a Time to Be Alive gets on there too, and On the Mouth.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the others, like Strings and Foolish. No, these are indie rock records.
Yeah.
The self-titled Unsane record. You talked about Total Destruction on the Patreon this week. Was that inspired by this one, or just your random?
No, that's just my my calendar. So corresponded with one of the years I am repeating.
I'm not a huge fan of that record, though.
Yeah, the first couple are not quite there yet. A great record, Those Who Fear Tomorrow by Integrity.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about hardcore.
Yeah, Madball.
Yeah, right.
I'm actually would be scared if I ran into Integrity in an aisle. In an aisle in the grocery store. Yeah.
Yeah. Just Dwid walking down them. Yeah, killer record, killer band.
Speaking of Screeching Weasel, My Brain Hurts came out that year, which is kind of, it's that and Bogota Bogota Bogota, right? Like those are the big Screeching Regals records.
Squeegee the windows on my Regal. Yeah, that's one of the ones that I know by name. Like,
yeah.
If you ask me to name Screeching Weasel records, those are the two.
There's Pennywise by Pennywise. Is that Brohim? Is that Brohim, bro?
I think they all have Brohim. Isn't that their... yes, this is the one with Brohim.
There's a re-recorded Brohim, yeah, on another record, too. Oh, when we were going through and kind of like deciding what albums to choose for this episode, some of the options you sent me the Bats, Fear of God. Who are the Bats, and why did you think...
The Bats are... They're pretty obscure, but they're a New Zealand jangle pop band. I mean, they played with Superchunk, and you know they toured the U.S. a few times, so they're like a band that people know. I think they actually recorded something with Mac. They're just a band that I don't know a lot about that I would like to know more about. That was kind of my like selfish like, hey, that's something no one's ever going to pick.
Yeah. Also, don't know how many people are going to listen to it either.
Yeah, which is why we ended up with going with what we went with.
Yeah, because another record that you sent me was Band of Susans, The Word and the Flesh. I like Band of Susans.
I think that one was for... I think I suggested that for the shoegaze.
That one? Maybe.
I don't know. You something different for this episode.
Are Band of Susans a shoegaze band? I listened to this record. I thought they were more like...
They're more like hum.
I thought they were more noisy.
Yeah, I would say they're maybe more like a noisier hum. Just kind of like earlier. Which one did I send you? I did send you a Band of Susans. I sent you two Band of Susans. I sent you Veil because I listened to that one last year and I never talked about it. But I did send you the one for 91. again, no one's going to pick Band of Susans.
Yeah. Bikini Kill released Revolution Girl Style Now, which this is probably one of the more confusing releases in Bikini Kill's discography. It's a demo, right? But people also kind of think of it as like the starting point, which I guess makes sense. It's a demo, but most people don't listen to the demo first.
Well, it's one of those demos that is like, it's the first big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like really significant when it came out, that most people just kind of treat it as a record.
Another potential choice we had was 9 Patriotic Hymns for Children by Born Against. Band Rules. I think I talked about them on a starting 5, didn't I?
Yeah, we talked about them. I think probably their second record.
Yeah, like Battle Hymns.
Yeah.
I think it's what that was.
Yeah, the Race War one or whatever it's called.
Battle Hymns of the Race War, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one with the Donahue clip on it. Yeah.
Yeah, Born Against are great. That was another one that was like, someone might pick that someday, maybe. I don't know.
Jawbox released Grippy. They're playing with Jawbreaker. God, I guess I need to buy tickets to the Atlanta one.
So many other lineups that I would rather have. I'm not going to either of these LA shows because I'm just like, I can't justify the price for like being a mile away from the stage.
Yeah, I think the place in Atlanta is a smaller venue. So
I don't think it's going to be like a huge venue, but it's definitely like they have a pit section where the tickets are more expensive, and then they have the general admission.
Oh, that's annoying.
Yeah.
The general admission in Atlanta is right on top of the stage.
Yeah.
And it's a little cheaper. So
that's what they were when I saw them in Hollywood. I was like 3 people back. It was about as close as I could reasonably get.
Yeah, I was like front row when I saw them in Virginia Beach. So, yeah. And when we saw them at Fest, we did the it's not really a bad view in Bo Diddley unless you're like literally way in the back, but like behind the tree line. But yeah, if you can get up on one of the sides, little grassy sides, that's the perfect way to see them there. Any couple more I guess we should mention?
Let's see. What is significant? What's interesting? Speaking of Ramones score, there's the Shonen Knife record.
Oh yeah,
that would be a great band to talk about.
I wish more.
I mean, it's sort of Ramones score, I guess, but
wish more of their stuff was easy to access here in the States.
Yeah.
YouTube core.
How about this? Let's just talk about Strong Reaction by Pegboy.
Hell yeah.
Great record.
Great.
Definitive. 91 is the definitive orgcore year, I guess. Like this and Mush.
The birthing point of orgcore.
Yeah. These are the records that like didn't immediately spawn those bands, but like they influenced the bands that did.
Yeah, the bands 5 years later who put out records. Because Fuel was around this time too. And Fuel put out their LP in 90. So like, yeah, that makes sense. Fuel, Leatherface.
The stuff that Hot Water Music was listening to.
Yeah. And D4 and yeah. Yeah, I love that Pegboy record. I mean, I love all 3 of the Pegboy records. They're all good. And then, let's see, Shudder to Think released Funeral at the Movies. I actually listened to 50,000 Years BC today by Shudder to Think. Was that like an Interscope record, I think? Epic. That's who did their albums. Yeah. Funeral at the Movies though, is that towards the end of their Discord run. I still can't get over. I guess Get Your Goat came out 92. That was also on Discord, but Pony Express record is the beginning of their Epic stuff. So I still don't understand why Epic signed Shudder to Think, but
it's a mystery. I guess I'm getting kind of far back here in the charts. I should walk back my earlier statement about 91. There's actually some pretty good stuff buried. There's a Sam I Am record.
Mm-hmm.
There's a, what did I just see? Seaweed record.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Like Duo Jets record.
Your
we want to tie it in to the episode.
Is that? Oh, I guess that would be. Yeah, I didn't do the thing where I normally dig on the similar genre, but yeah, we can maybe do that later. But
it's really funny because the singer of my band was we were talking after the show, and he was talking about like hearing an interview with Cat Power where she talks about flat duo jets and like knowing them when she was like a teenager. Just like would like talk to them on the phone and stuff. It's like, that's weird. You have to like, nobody knows this band. Which I guess that means Cat Power is from North Carolina.
Is Flat Duo Jets from North Carolina?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're from Carborough.
See, I don't know shit about them, and I live in the state.
Cat Power's from, she was born in Atlanta. So, I don't know, she must have lived in North Carolina at some point.
I pulled Psychobilly and Rockabilly records from this year, so there's actually a lot to talk about. So we'll save that whenever we actually we'll talk about our main record first. But I wanted to get some like context for later. So yeah, we'll talk about the record. So I gave you the year 1991, and you selected "Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em" by the Reverend Horton Heat.
It's a Psychobilly Freakout! It's a Psychobilly Freakout!
So
Yeah, I guess I kind of picked this one.
yeah, kind of. Yeah, I'd say you picked the choices, and then we talked over the choices. And
Yeah, we narrowed it down.
and we were like, which one of people might listen to the episode? And
There was some debate. There was like, do we want to? Is this guy? Are they icky? We had questions.
They've not been definitively answered for me either, but
No.
we'll get into that too. Let's do some stats. So, the Reverend Horton Heat are a psychobilly band from Dallas, Texas. They're from the Deep Ellum section of Dallas that a lot of bands got their start in. They formed in 1985. This is their first full-length album. The release date is up for question. So, it was released either November 1st, 1990 or November 1st, 1991 on Sub Pop Records. Don't know where 92 comes from. There's like a reissue date on Discogs for 92, I think. We'll get into that in a minute. So it was originally released as a 10-inch with only 8 tracks, and then it was released the same year as an LP and a CD with all 12 tracks. I assume that 10-inch was just Sub Pop doing one of their like random limited edition special probably record club things that they do occasionally. The person on this record is the Reverend Horton Heat, aka Jim Heath, on guitar and vocals, Jimbo Wallace on the double bass, and Patrick Taz Bentley on drums. So the release issue, Discogs says 1990, Rate Your Music said 1991, Spotify says 1991, the Reverend Horton Heat website says 1990, Sub Pop's website says 1991, SoundScan says 1991. I think it's a 1991 record that has just a 1990 copyright on the back of the sleeve.
Well, the 10-inch might have actually come out in 90. I think that might be where the big confusion is. I think most likely the 10-inch came out in 90, and then the full version was released in 91.
I tried to find anything. I tried to the Google search of before 1991, and I couldn't find any articles from around the time. That would be prior to 91. But then I also did before 1992, and I couldn't find any articles for 91 either. So which leads me to think it probably did come out November 91, because that would explain why there's no articles about it in 91. I don't know. I didn't try before 93 to see what shows up that way. Whatever it is, we're talking about it today in relation with 91. So I feel like those SoundScan numbers might be a good indicator, unless it was like, because they wouldn't have waited an entire year with the 10-inch to release it in November the following year on LP and CD with a 90 copyright date on it still.
SoundScan didn't start until 91. So nothing that would have been sold in 1990 would have been counted.
Yeah. Weird. I don't know. Sub Pop says 91. the band says 90. Do with that what you will. No TV appearances in either year, as far as I could tell. But, yeah. So, the first thing I usually ask is what made you choose this album? But then I usually just wind up asking you what's your kind of like prior Reverend Horton Heat experience before re-listening to it for this episode. So, we'll roll with those if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I know this record pretty well. Got a little bit into Reverend Horton Heat in the teens. As a teenager, I think we both kind of dabbled a little bit in psychobilly and realized it's not a genre that interests us in the long term. But I've always kind of had a little bit of a soft spot for Reverend Horton Heat because I did really enjoy this record and some of the other stuff I heard. I think they're an interesting band in the way that they got kind of successful, but not huge. They never got to like Brian Setzer level or anything like that. Even like, I feel like they didn't even get to like a Cherry Poppin' Daddies level. You know what I mean? Like it was almost, they had a slower burn of cultural relevance, just below popularity. Because I mean, it's such a niche thing, but it was the 90s, and we did all of that silly stuff that we did with all of the retro stuff that we were into. That's always intrigued me. Like, why did they? I don't know. Odd band to have the kind of attention that they had.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the first time I ever heard Reverend Horton Heat, and the only thing I could think of, I may have heard Psychobilly Freakout one time before this, but I think it was in Guitar Hero that like I really was like, this, I know this song. Like this is my closest like connection to the song, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Back in those days where Dylan and I were both in community college, and between classes we would go to Best Buy or Circuit City where they had their display copies of Guitar Hero and just play them for a very long time to the point where like, I mean, I know employees in those stores didn't give a damn, you know, they didn't care at all, but you know, I'm sure they're like, oh, there's those guys. They're back again.
Yep. They're back to stand there and play Guitar Hero for 2 hours and not buy anything. Sometimes we'd skip class, too.
Yeah. Sometimes if we get close to, like, when class was supposed to be happening, I think you even asked me one time, you were like, don't you have class? I was like, yeah. No wonder I didn't pass the first time I went. So I think, yeah, the Psychobilly Freakout on there is the first time I really heard it or paid attention to it. And then I think we did that thing where it's like, it's blog downloading time. So like, I'm sure some blog that I followed was like, had the whole discography. Because, God, that was something that those blogs did.
Yeah. And this is again, not really a Blogspot band. I mean, everything was a Blogspot band for like that 2 years. But this wasn't the kind of thing that, I don't know what blog we would have downloaded it from.
Who knows? I mean, I had a whole slew of them bookmarked that I would visit, and they're all gone now. None of them exist anymore. But yeah, I don't know which one it would have been. So I probably downloaded like this one, and then maybe like the next, I could see myself maybe downloading like the next 3 as well. And then like I would try them, and then it'd just be like diminishing returns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
But in my mind, I still always thought of this one as, that's a good record. Like, it's a good record. So re-listening to it, is it a good record?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there are a lot of big things going for it. The Reverend, what is his real name? Jim Heath.
Yeah.
He's a great guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a genuinely great, interesting guitar player because he's doing like, yeah, he does all of the like the Chuck Berry, Duane Eddy, like all of the classic rockabilly kind of riffs and stuff, but then he gets a little out there occasionally. He's really trying, it seems like he's really trying to just write good, interesting songs that are in a style instead of just recreating something that he's heard done a million times. I think that his tone is really incredible. The tape echo that he uses all over this record just sounds great, and the tremolo that they use All Over the Place sounds good. It's a really great effects record for those kinds of like ancient rock sound effects. So that's it's just got, and I think it's just got a good atmosphere. Like, it's psychobilly without being like Draculas and zombies, it's like just kind of like generally lurid and scary without being like monsters, and more about like doing drugs.
Sex and drugs and rock and roll is kind of like the overall, theme of the album, and steak. I think it is good. I think it still holds up. I think it's, maybe you have to have a little buy-in. You have to kind of want to be like, listening to this kind of record,
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna hear that bass, that double bass click, and that's like a pass fail. I mean,
yeah,
for a lot of people. So you just have to be willing to be like, this is a rockabilly record.
Yeah, and I'd say
listening to rockabilly.
It probably is more rockabilly than psychobilly, and I think even he kind of rejects that term himself. But it's like, well, you did call a song Psychobilly Freakout, though, so
yeah.
The Cramps rejected it too, so
yeah.
He was very much influenced by like country, rockabilly, jazz, blues, swing, like all that kind of stuff. So, and you can hear it on this record too. Like all of that stuff is there. And it does have a punk little edge to it. I'm sure he was into punk music, and that's why he plays. I feel like you don't play that style of music this way unless you're into punk music. And if you look at like early performances, which I found a bunch of early performances by them, and he's just wearing like cut off t-shirts and a backwards baseball hat. Like, he's not wearing the full suit yet. Yeah. I feel like the full suit thing came when he started getting more TV exposure. I saw multiple 95 sets though that they played live, and they're all just in like t-shirts and shorts. It's kind of funny. It's like, oh, they added some theatrics to it later, because then I think later they just pretty much just wear the suit. He wears the suits all the time. I don't know that the other guys wear suits, but he does. So yeah, you've got to want to be listening to a psychobilly record or rockabilly record. So if that's not anything you can make yourself do, then don't worry about it. Pass. Go on to the next one. Something else.
I mean, I think there's a fair amount of like Nick Cave and Birthday Party, Gun Club, that kind of influence to what they were doing. I think that's kind of like, it's not really the scene they come out of because they are in Texas.
Yeah.
Which, and that's an interesting place to be. Like, they're kind of, what was alternative culture in Texas like? I feel like they maybe are just kind of like in between worlds, where they're like, we're sort of punk and rock and, all of that stuff, but like we also are like genuinely into country music and Texas blues and all of that stuff. And we've learned to play like that. And I think that it's a scene that it benefited you to have some rustic element to really get traction in Texas in the early 90s, late 80s.
So I pulled up the records that came out in 1991 that are tagged as psychobilly or rockabilly, as well as influenced. So the other records that came out this year, it's kind of like, oh yeah, these bands. So the Cramps released "Look Mom No Head," kind of the originators there. The aforementioned Flat Duo Jets as well. The 5, 6, 7, 8s released a record, which they've been around forever. Necromantics released "Curse of the Coffin." Demented Are Go released Orgasmic Nightmare. Southern Culture on the Skids released Too Much Pork for Just One Fork. I've never heard that album title. And then there's a Batmobile record, a Madsen record, the Meteors, and
that's the thing. Like a lot of these names are names that pop up all throughout the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Psychobilly as a genre is something that was going through the 80s from the late 70s. And, and like Stray Cats were big in the 80s.
Yeah.
So like by the 90s, this is a really passé genre where bands are putting out their 4th and 5th records or even more. Like in the case of the Cramps, that's probably where does that fall in their discography?
Oh, that's on the latter half,
I mean, they were slow through the 80s, so that's only their 5th record, but
yeah, but it's also after the switch with a date with Elvis is day 6. So, yeah, I mean, they have actually less records than you'd think. Huh? They only have 9. You'd think they would have way more. The thing that I was looking at though is, yes, the Cramps have always been there doing their spooky thing, but the Necromantics are the ones that made Psychobilly turn that tide into spooky Halloween hot rod music. Like, because I feel like Necromantics are probably the one to probably influence your Tiger Armies. Your every other like Psychobilly band that like took the creepy, misfitsy, early Cramps spookiness and ran with it and kind of like tainted the genre, I think. Because now everybody thinks of Psychobilly as just like, ooh, spooky music, spooky, corny music.
Misfits with double bass and, Chuck Berry riffs. And I mean, Demented Are Go kind of did it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. This record came out in 91, and then they have one couple before, but I don't think they blew up until a little later.
It's really odd. It's a genre that's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Like geographically, like you have Stray Cats, you have Demented Are Go in the UK, and you have like, the Cramps on the West Coast, you have Reverend Horton Heats in Texas, you have Necromantics they started in Denmark.
Batmobiles in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Mad Sin are from Germany. There's a lot of like Latin American or like LA Spanish bands that are rockabilly, like Los Rebeldes, Los Twist. Like, there's a lot on here of those kind of bands. And then you have Flatwood Jets being from North Carolina, Southern Culture on the Skids, North Carolina. Are Southern Culture on the Skids the closest thing to the Reverend Horton Heat thing?
I think they were I think from the beginning they were always a little bit cornier and sillier.
Yeah.
I think they were maybe trying to do kind of like a little bit of a B-52s, but more twangy.
Yeah. Where does Mojo Nixon kind of fall in this kitschy lane of punk offshoots? Otis, the first record came out in 1990. So like Mojo Nixon's right here in the same thing, doing their weird whatever they are.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing because when we talked about the Cramps and we've talked about this before, where there's like the late 70s and early 80s, you have so much 50s nostalgia that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that happens aggressively in mainstream culture throughout the 80s. I mean, you've got Stray Cats, you've got Back to the Future. Like, there's so much 50s stuff. I mean,
Billy Joel.
Billy Joe. Even like Springsteen, like, yeah, he had big synthesizers, but it's also like, you can tell he's drawing heavily on 50s music, and like a lot of the Heartland rock stuff is like tons of like Bo Diddley and Buddy Holly and 50s influence. So for there to be a alternative subculture that's still like underground by the 1990s, early 90s is weird.
Well, doesn't it gets a little later. Like, it gets into the more early 60s elements with the 90s. Like, the 90s are more 60s focused, but like the earlier part, like the bowler shirts and the tiki culture stuff, and
then you get a little bit of retro mishmash.
Mm-hmm.
People being confused about decades.
Yeah, which I think explains why the Reverend Horton Heat and like, I don't know, a lot of these other bands kind of continue. Even like Wrecker from the Crypt does a little bit of that too, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I was curious about Deep Ellum. Like, I wasn't sure the other bands that came out of this scene when he was there, or when I keep saying he. So basically, like, prior to the first record, there wasn't a consistent lineup. There was different bass players and drummers. Starting with this album, it's the bass player is still in the band. Like, he still plays with him. The drummer left after the third record, and there's been a couple different drummers, and he's added other elements to the band as well, keys and stuff like that. So I say he coming out of Deep Ellum because, you know, Jim's the one who's from that scene that stays in the band. So
Old 97s, I think that's the other big
is it
band that's from this. Toadies.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, it's a venue too, right? Like, it's like the, you know, it's the way they talk about people coming out of CBGBs, you know, like it's centered around a specific venue. Because if you look it up now, Meshuggah's playing there.
Yeah.
So, like, it's kind of hard, I guess, to find, like, who comes out of that scene. There's a compilation that Reverend Horton Heat appeared on in '87 about all Deep Ellum bands, and I didn't recognize any of those band names, so... Anyway. So, okay. The one other thing I wanted to talk about is, and I avoided talking about it because it was the number one record of 1991, Nevermind by Nirvana came out this year on Sub Pop Records, which is what this record came out on.
Yeah.
How is that the same? What?
It's not. It's Sub Pop is just being like, yeah, we'll put out the weird rockabilly record and the massive grunge record. Like, I mean, they didn't know that it was going to be a massive record.
So
they they were definitely like, we got this band and they're definitely getting some heat. They, there was no way for them to know that Smells Like Teen Spirit would have done what it did.
So I was looking too. I was just like, what else does Sub Pop put out that year? And so I have all the LPs that they put out this year and big EPs. So Mudhoney, Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, Tad, 8-Way Santa, Nirvana, Mudhoney, Tad. Yeah, totally makes perfect sense. There's some lesser bands that like Rain Section and the Walkabouts. Like, I guess Green Magnet School. Like that. I guess you could call those like Sub Pop kind of post grunge bands. But then they have these other weird records. So you mentioned earlier, but Seaweed really despised on Sub Pop. I always forget that Seaweed's a Sub Pop band. Good record. I guess there's a punkiness to Nirvana that I guess that would be kind of appealing to people and why they would pick Seaweed. There's also a Dwarves record. Thank Heaven for Little Girls came out on Sub Pop, which that kind of makes it make a little bit more sense with Reverend Horton Heat. It's also the same year as Earth's Extracapsular Extraction came out. I'm sure that's just like they were a Seattle band and, you got to see this band type thing. And friends with, Kurt Cobain. So it's just weird. There's like
okay. They have stuff like they have the Headcoats. They have a lot of the Headcoats stuff.
Those didn't come out that year.
Well, in 1990, they have Heavens to Murgatroyd by the Headcoats. Now that absolutely makes sense. Reverend Horton Heat and the Headcoats being on the same record label, that makes a lot of sense.
It's just funny that, like, out of all of those records, too, if you think about the ones that have stood the test of time, it's Nevermind and the Rockabilly record that I think are probably, like, the most well-known. I don't know about what that Mudhoney record stands in their discography. And Tad were always, like, they were there and, like, well-regarded, but maybe too heavy, too, But, yeah, if you're going to go to, like, a bigger, like, Pitchfork or Paste type, rating system or recognition, it'll be Nirvana, Mudhoney, and this record as the memorable ones from that year, which is just funny.
Well, Codeine.
That came out the year before. That's a reissue in 91.
Oh, in 91. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But that's weird too. Codeine and Earth makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Sub Pop were just... they put out stuff that they were just interested in, I think. You know?
They still do. I mean...
Yeah.
They put a lot of stuff out that I don't really dig on, but it is different. And they didn't stay on whatever, just that one sound and then force themselves into, you know, obscurity. They rolled with the times and they took different stuff.
You know, yeah. I mean, like, after Nirvana, they kept putting out Beat Happening and, like, Seaweed and those bands. They didn't, you know, they kept putting out what they were putting out. They didn't suddenly try to be like, well, we got to go get more Nirvanas.
Yeah. I mean, they already had the 3 Nirvanas anyway.
They were putting out Beat Happening records knowing full well that absolutely no chance that Beat Happening is getting on the radio. I think the timing is a little off for this Reverend Horton Heat record. I think they kind of stay as like a little bit of an undercurrent. I think it had this come out in like, what's the big... When does the swing revival start happening?
Well, I was like, well, when does Reverend Horton Heat appear on the Drew Carey show and Conan O'Brien? Like, that's that's when they are probably at their most recognizable, despite those records not being that popular. The ones that came out around that, like, It's Martini Time was the record they were promoting when they were on Conan. Yeah. And it's like, I'm betting that even then people were like, get the first one by the late 90s when they're being talked about. And that kitschiness came around, that 60s, 50s got bigger after grunge. So like that's when they kind of capitalized on it.
They show up on Drew Carey show in 97.
Yeah. And they were on Conan on 96.
Yeah.
And he was on Homicide: Life in the Streets too.
Which... That's the episode of the Drew Carey show with like Joey Ramone and
because they're doing a battle of the bands.
They're doing the battle of the bands and they're trying out different people.
Yeah,
to be in their band.
And Jim's in the other rival band.
Yeah,
though there is a really funny joke in it where he says to Ryan Stiles' character, he's like, "Hey, guess I ran into your ex-girlfriend last night in my bed," and then Ryan Stiles' response was, "Well, you should. You've been married to her for 15 years. He got the best. I think he got one of the better laughs in that scene. But yeah, it's funny. He's on like TV shows. Like I guess there was like a little bit of him going, "I could be like John Doe."
Yeah. I could be Dwight Yoakam.
Yeah. I think I was surprised at how many tracks on this record were instrumental or mostly instrumental. So, like, Bullet starts off. There's no lyrics in that, just, woo!
Yeah. Psychobilly Freakout. It's a Psychobilly Freakout.
I'll tell you what it is.
Marijuana. He just says marijuana.
Marijuana. D for dangerous. No words in that one.
I mean, they were definitely doing just like a Link Ray rumble, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I bet Link Ray probably was actually... I don't know. He said Stray Cats were a big influence in Brian Setzer. So I don't know. I think he just listened to a lot of stuff like that. I will say though, the best songs are the ones with very little lyrics. I mean, I'm Mad's pretty good, and Bad Reputation. Bad Reputation is like one of those songs that I think of when I think of Reverend Horton Heat. Unfortunately, this album also has Big Dwarf Rodeo and Eat Steak.
Yeah, so it kind of comes with the genre, right? You have to have these like dumb songs. Big Dwarf Rodeo is kind of a shame because it's a really good riff. Like musically, it's a really good song.
Yeah,
and I mean, like,
at least it's called Big Dwarf Rodeo. Dwarf is still actually an accepted term.
Right? He does actually use the correct word, and there's something to be said about what he's talking about. Like, is he being the exploiter, or is he just describing something that is what it is, that is part of kind of this like whole carnivalesque retro subculture, and like something that would have been something that you could see in Texas? Is he like kind of, what's he really saying about it? I don't know that he's really trying to say anything all that smart. But, I think Eat Steak is another song that I don't think I got until now, like revisiting it. The way that he just belabors the point.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's really kind of making fun of like that Texas obsession with eating beef.
Yeah, because it gets kind of graphic on the explanation of like killing cows to make steak, and like it talks about the blood on the the slaughterhouse, and like he gets more graphic, and it could just be like, oh, look what we're doing, we're being real graphic about what it means, but also there's a slight commentary there. I mean, I don't think he's a vegetarian, but
no, I don't think he is, and I don't think he's like even like. But yeah, I think there is something to that, a way that you can listen to that song where you can say like he's just kind of like he's really like illustrating the grotesque, like particularly masculine Western culture obsession with like eating meat.
Yeah, ranch. You've got the country western rancher kind of like song structure. Yeah. So when we were deciding on talking about this record, one of the things we were like, are they canceled? Like, is Reverend Horton Heat something we're not supposed to talk about? So like the only thing that I can really find about him is the worst thing I could find about him is that he was like refusing to cancel shows at the beginning of the pandemic. He's like, you can't stop rock and roll was his thing, and he just didn't want, he's like, I don't want to stop. Basically, I mean, it's his living. I understand that to a degree. He did wind up canceling shows and getting stuff rescheduled later, and he didn't continue championing the like, no, we should be. He's not pulling a Van Morrison and an Eric Clapton anymore. Like, he was just very early on not wanting to cancel his shows.
Yeah, which could just be from being a little bit misinformed, not realizing the extent of it, and also being, this is my livelihood. If I stop touring right now, I'm not getting paid this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, he did wind up canceling shows later. And, he's playing shows now, but also so is everyone else. And we're in a surging Omicron wave.
Yeah, I mean...
And nobody cares now. Like, it's...
No one...
I guess the argument is, well, this was early and we didn't know information, blah, blah, blah. We didn't have vaccine, that kind of stuff. But I think
I'm not canceling him over that. It's not like he was like, no, I'm going to go play Sturgis.
Like Smash Mouth did.
Yeah.
Smash Mouth did the same thing. Smash Mouth refused to cancel shows too. And y'all champion that band still. I mean, I guess. You memed them, I guess. That's something different. But and so I was like, okay, what's this dude's deal? Like, what is he politically? He's from Texas. He plays a throwback style of music, but he's a musician. It's worth talking about that the subculture attached to it and the general fan base is particularly conservative and has a lot of racist bands and racist, like overtly racist people in the scene. Yeah. I did as much research as I possibly could. I tried to like find things that he would have said about presidents. The literal only other thing I could find was an interview he did in the year 2000, and this was around the Hanging Chads, George Bush, Al Gore, thing. And he was like, I think George W. Bush and Al Gore are fine choices. And he's like, I liked Ronald Reagan and I liked Bush Sr. I've never found him to say anything else about Obama. I've never found him to say anything about Trump. He doesn't wade into politics. And he seems very middle of the road the one time I found that he did. So one of two things happens. He's conservative and just doesn't talk about it. Which for a musician, all right, he's not using his platform to...
Yeah. I mean, it's Buck Owens.
Yeah.
The whole thing was like, oh yeah, he was totally conservative, but he was also like, I'm not going to make political statements with my art. I don't want to alienate anyone from listening to my music.
Yeah. And it's a little cynical, I guess you could say. You're not necessarily like standing up for what you believe in, but also it's an approach. It's a different way of thinking. And the way I don't know. He's like, I think they're both good. Makes me think he didn't vote.
Yeah.
And probably doesn't.
That was my suspicion, is like probably just like vaguely libertarian, but otherwise apolitical, doesn't actually vote. was most likely what his actual politics are. Yeah.
So is judging an artist based on their political beliefs? I don't know. It's a very tough kind of line to kind of walk.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have a view that I don't necessarily agree with, that the political views of everyone whose art and media you consume need to align with yours.
Yeah.
Or at least need to like caucus with yours.
Yeah.
And I, at least personally, I have found that to be too difficult to do. And I don't think that it's wrong to say as an artist, like, look, I don't make political music. I'm not gonna talk about politics outside of my music.
Yeah.
I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I don't think that every entertainer needs to be an activist.
Yeah.
In connection with their career. I can't make political statements at my work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not allowed to. So yeah, there is. Yeah, I just have been thinking about that lately. Like, I understand standing up for what you believe in and not wanting to support someone who actively goes against what you believe. Like, I get that. But yeah, this like make everybody stand up and kind of take a roll call on where they stand.
And there has been plenty of commentary or discourse associated with that on the left, of people being like, you're creating performative wokeness by requiring everyone to always be making a political statement. Mm-hmm. A lot of bad people say the right things,
yeah,
to get traction, to get a platform.
Yeah. So we're giving him a pass. I mean, until he does something. I hope this is not one of our zeitgeisty things where we accidentally tap into like what happens soon, and then he comes out in Jim Heath on
Brooklyn Vegan article is like, Jim Heath goes on racist tirade.
If that happens, then we'll be distancing ourselves from. You could take them as they come.
But yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. I think that would happen.
He's been pretty smart. I mean, throughout his career to not really fuck anything up. So
they didn't come out in defense of what's his name, Mojo, not Mojo. Mojo Nixon's fine. I think I said something bad about Mojo Nixon earlier. Mojo Nixon's totally okay. I want to correct that. What's his name? Squidbilly.
Unknown Henson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, what did Mojo Nixon do?
No, he's totally fine. He's got like an XM radio show on like Willie Nelson's channel or something like that.
I mean, if Willie's all right with you. Looking at this record, it's the most popular record from Reverend Horton Heat on Spotify and Rate Your Music. 3 of the tracks are in the top 10 songs on Spotify. It's the second highest rated album on Rate Your Music by the users, behind the second album, which makes me... That's the other one that I was like, I wonder if that's good. I remember liking that one. So I wonder if if I revisit it, I'll get as much mileage out of it. Last FM is the weirdo again, though. So, Psychobilly Freakout is the number 1 track of all time, according to Last FM. Scrabbles. Makes sense. Probably the most well-known song they ever did. Every other track in the top 10 most played tracks on Last FM for Reverend Horton Heat, except for 2, I Can't Surf, which is from Liquor in the Front, and Holy Roll. Oh, no, it's just the one. So, Psychobilly Freakout is from this record. I Can't Surf from Liquor in the Front. Everything else in the top 10 is from the greatest hits. Holy Roller, greatest hits. Now, 3 of those tracks are from this record, but it's the Holy Roller version.
I guess it's the Last FM most popular period of usage coincides with Psychobilly Freakout being in Guitar Hero, and most people not wanting to invest in listening to the entirety of the Reverend Horton Heat discography, going, I'll just listen to this greatest hits and see if I like this band enough.
Yeah, I think they need to do some like data crunching on that site to kind of be like, we need percentage of users instead of like literal plays for those numbers to work anymore, I think. But Last.fm is a site that I am amazed that still exists because of... If you've been on it, you'll know why. I'm like, what are y'all doing over here? Yeah, I just think it's funny when the greatest hits version is the most popular, and it's the most popular album by the band. So yeah, it is definitely. I just want to hear the hits, which with Reverend Horton Heat,
What hits?
yeah, I'm like, huh? Though the highest selling record in their discography or the highest, not the highest selling, the highest ranking record on the Billboard is the 2014 album Rev. It was like number 111. They didn't enter the Billboard until like It's Martini Time, I think, and it was like 160 something. Which I'm like, well, that clearly just means people aren't buying records. if the 2014 Reverend Horton Heat album is the highest ranking album that year.
Yeah, the people who are buying Reverend Horton Heat records in 2014 are the people that are buying CDs.
Yeah. 2014 was probably before they were doing not scrobbling, but like streaming.
Yeah.
in their stats. So, yeah.
It's just going based entirely off of SoundScan numbers for whatever's selling at major retailers.
Yeah. So the last cool thing about this record is it's recorded live in studio. Live to 2-inch tape. They had apparently recorded the entire album, traditional, multi-track instruments, and them and the label were like, something's missing. So they just went like, fuck it, let's do it. Fuck it, we'll do it live, and did it to tape, with the exception of the final track on the album, Love Whip, and you could tell it's like that's a different recording session.
Yeah,
but that's cool. It might be why I like this record, and maybe
it sounds live,
not the others.
Yeah,
as much.
Yeah, it really does have a really fun energy, and a cool raw sound, and I think that it's just a tiny bit too long. Yeah, I think they could have cut one of the instrumentals if they had rewritten Big Dwarf Rodeo. I think that one could stay, but otherwise, I think it's one of the more expendable songs on here.
It's a Dark Day is too long.
I think it's a good song, but it is long and slow.
Yeah. But yeah, like Put It To Me Straight's pretty fun. Baby You Know What's pretty fun. We didn't really talk about the upright with the double bass. Can you hear it? I can hear the clicks.
You can hear it. I mean, it's just like you hear it right at the beginning, and then after that, you just completely stop paying attention to it.
I do think the drumming on this record is excellent.
Yeah.
Which that guy later went on to play in Duff McKagan's Loaded. But yeah, the star of the record is Jim Heath. His guitar playing. He knows it. That's why there's so many mostly instrumental tracks.
Yeah.
All the live footage I watched is just primarily him just like playing guitar. It's not... He sings, but I feel like singing is just an excuse for him to play guitar. A lot of these, so... You coming back to this record anytime? Not anytime soon, probably, but...
No. No, not anytime in the next year.
Yeah.
They have Liquor in the Front came out in 94, so that's on my calendar. We'll see if I hit it.
I will say that this re-listening to this did make me want to, like, well, when I run across them now, I might actually give the record a shot.
Yeah.
Based on whatever I'm looking at that day to make my decision. So there's that. It's worth it. I have 243 Scrabbles for Reverend Horton Heat.
That's entirely because of me.
You think so?
Yeah.
Let's see what my does it give you the over time? There we go. I want to see when I was listening to it. Apparently in 2015 I listened to it. No, it's not because of you. That means it's all me. 2015 and 2022. That means I listened to it more than once in 2015.
Weird.
What was I doing that year? I had 25 Scrabbles that year. That's at least listening to it twice. Though I did have a period where the janky, cheap MP3 player I had, every time I plugged it in to the computer to Scrabble, it would like double count stuff. So that could be the same year that I have like way more listens to everything. But that's funny. Oh, there it is. I listened to We Three Kings. So I just listened to different Reverend Horton Heat records.
Yeah, you listened to the Christmas record.
That's funny. Well, I think we kind of sufficiently covered the record and then some. So we'll wrap that up here then and let Dylan go to work.
Yep.
And yeah, so thank you everyone for listening. Head over to the Patreon if you want to vote in the poll. And Follow us on all social media. Give us a rating. Give us a rating or review on iTunes. And apparently you can do ratings on Spotify. I'm not happy about that. But go ahead and do that. Maybe we'll have a better rating on Spotify than we will on iTunes because, people were rating them later. I don't know. But thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you next week.
Hey, Lewis, I saw your ex-girlfriend last night. In my bed.
What you should do, you've been married to her for 15 years.